I'm ready when you guys are.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome to my first candle making class. My name is Vicki Stafford. I'm a local artist and a mother of two. Some of you guys might recognize me from my project Masks for New Jersey. I've been sewing and donating masks to local charities and selling masks to help fund my projects. And I've been doing Get Crafty with Miss Vicki since the beginning of the summer here at the library as well. I love sharing art with people. So tonight we're going to do candles. It's one of my favorite projects to do. It's a really great way to recycle all those old jars that seem to just accumulate in the house. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I see a beautiful glass jar and I can't bring myself to recycle it or throw it out. And so my studio ends up just stacked with them. So the supplies that you need for this project tonight, I had asked that you have a double boiler all set up for yourselves, and the instructions for that were provided with the kit itself, hot glue gun, the 2 jars. If you have it on hand, a skewer or something pokey can be really helpful, but it's not necessary. I provided 2 wicks here in their wick clips. These ones are nice. They're filled with zinc and they stand because they're coated with a really heavy duty wax. There should also be 2 little wick stickers here, and these are going to be used to clamp these down to the bottom of your jar. A pair of scissors, very helpful. And then I had included the ribbons. I have 1 set of ribbon here that is more rustic. So I've got this that I prefer to pair with the red ribbon and the white and the button. And then I have one that's kind of glitzy because especially for gifting, we all have that friend who they really like things that are shiny and glamorous. I'm kind of that person myself, to be told. So we'll use those. So while our wax is warming up in the double boiler, really important to note what the wax needs to look like. I'm gonna show you guys. I'm gonna take a quick peek. It's gonna melt down. We don't want it to get too hot. We don't want it to get bubbly. If you need to, go ahead and chop it up. It's fairly soft. It should melt pretty much like butter, honestly. All right. Once it's melted, you can remove it from the heat. But while we're waiting, I'm going to take 1 wick sticker and we're going to attach it to the bottom metal part of the wick. This is like those little double-sided foam stickers. So once you attach it, there'll be a second piece of sticker tape here to coax away. If you have nails, it works best. But that'll come away. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. If I'm going too fast, please, let me know. Typical Jersey girl, I talk really fast. So once I've got the sticker all nice and attached, I'm going to find the center bottom part of the jar. Just get it in there. Make sure to press down really well. If you look at the bottom of the jar, you'll be able to tell that it's stuck nice and neat. I hear my water bubbling. I'm going to turn my heat down. And we're going to just do that with the second jar as well. It's my favorite part is decorating the jars. So, a naked jar on its own can be very, very pretty too. But there's just something about the way the light plays through the ribbons that's so romantic. I have some of these candles set up right now in my hall tree in my living room for Christmas time. And my 5-year-old is finally at that age where he respects fire. And so it's so nice to be able to have candles out again. For the longest time I couldn't. Okay. So once those are in there, as you notice, the wicks stand up nice and straight. So these won't give you any trouble when we're pouring wax. These are so user-friendly. I totally recommend them if you find that this is a nice relaxing hobby, because it keeps it a lot easier than having to tie regular cotton wicking, which is a little more advanced, and you know, honestly, it's just tedious. All right, so I think I'm going to start with the rustic, and I cut everybody's ribbon a little bit long, so that you'll have a bit of overlap here to play with. Makes it a little easier when you're trying to glue everything down and position it than if everything's super exact. So what I like to do is just a little dot of hot glue here, nothing really big, and then just very carefully fix it in place. Fingernails, the back end here, that way you don't burn yourself. And then once it feels like it's cooled and is holding in place, firmly roll it. And then we'll do the same thing, but this time on the ends of the ribbon, just a little bit of glue. You don't want it to come seeping out through the burlap because that can be a challenge. And then just very gently with the back of your finger, push it down. You'll get a nice clean seam on the back. And it looks nice and neat on the front. And honestly, something like this, even on its own, is very good. It's very pretty, and it's easy to clean up too. So you'll be able to redress the jars when you're done with them. Once you got that, we'll add the red ribbon. And you can play around with it a little bit to center it. And again, I start on the back and I overlap. So just a little bit of glue. So a lot of times these newer materials have plastic mixed into them. So if you add too much hot glue, you will actually melt the ribbon. You can imagine my surprise when I was first starting out and I learned that. It was quite a shock. Oops. Sometimes I'm a little too conservative though with the glue. Get that on. Make sure that the glue is cool. And then we can overlap. If you find that it's too long, there are two ways to deal with it. You can either snip it, or you can fold it if you'd like, and make like a nice clean seam. It's the back of the candle, and so for me, most people aren't going to be seeing that. I'll snip it. Cool trick that I learned in grade school for these old ribbons, because they have that little bit of plastic. If you find that they're fraying and you don't have any no fray on hand, who does, honestly, you can take a lighter and very quickly pass it just in front of the ribbon, and it will melt the ends of the ribbon and seal it to keep it from fraying. It's a really neat trick. I believe I learned that from my 6th grade crafts teacher. Don't remember her name, but I remember the trick. It's funny how people sometimes manage to stay with you. Now I've got pretty red ribbon. And then again, we're going to do the white ribbon. I'm all about layering. And that's the solid tactic for the winter, isn't it? So again, from the back. And this time, since this ribbon is so fine and thin, where I have bundled my seams here, I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit more so that I don't have all of this bulk, and it would mess with the way that the lines fall. So yeah, if you scoot it over like even just 1/4 of an inch, it's going to make your life a lot easier in either direction. And lay the ribbon down very gently. It's the futziest one because it's so tiny. But I think there's something so impressive about getting that very tiny ribbon in there and the way it breaks everything up. These are my favorite colors for the holiday season, that burlap with red and white. Just think it looks so handsome, so romantic and clean. And I feel like it really matches with almost any decor. So I have to say, this year, looking at a lot of the interior decorating magazines, a lot of interesting color choices for a holiday decor. I've been loving the teals that have been coming through and the fuchsias. It's very bold and it's so cheerful and unexpected. I might have to update my ribbons and give it a try for moving into the new year. So we're going to glue again. And if you have a little bit of overlap here, I would say take advantage of that and we'll trim it after it's set. Because again, this is such a thin ribbon. We don't want it to be a burn hazard for our little fingers. So I have a little bit of a tail here and I can just snip that now that the glue is set. So now, just want to coax it into place before we place our button. And again, if you aren't feeling the button, don't have to do it by any means. But as far as a little bit of rustic style goes, there's nothing more cute than a little button. It reminds me of like a little belt. It's very feminine. So try to find the exact opposite side from your seam. That way you'll be sure that the button is facing front and you won't be tempted to turn it and see a slightly less pretty side. You can even lay it down and you'll be able to find that weight. And again, since there are buttonholes here, we want to be really careful about how much glue so that you're not going to end up with seepage coming through the buttonholes. Put it on, decide about the orientation of those holes on the button, and then just very gently. The buttons that I provided are wood, so they should play pretty nicely with the hot glue. And then you have this really adorable jar. We'll put this one to the side. And now everybody who loves glitter will have fun with this, and everybody who hates glitter is going to curse me. So again, it's going to be the same kind of process, but the mesh I know is a little trickier to work with. But if you take your time and you apply a thin line of glue coming down the jar, you'll have multiple points for it to catch. And I go out about 1/4 of an inch. And I'll just push down. If you're not a fan of the hot glue and the glitter all over your fingers, you can even use the gun and just kind of push. And you'll see it come through. And then very carefully, you'll roll it around the jar. And this one I gave a lot of extra, as this is futzy. And I want everybody to be able to cinch it without it being a burn fest. So now that the glue is cool, I can hold it and I can pull it a little tight. And that's going to stretch the ribbon so that it conforms better to the jar. Really smart thing to do when you're working with mesh like this. Don't go back over the same glue line that you set up with, because you're actually going to weaken the bond. go over about 1/4 of an inch and get some more glue down. And you're going to see that the glue kind of bubbles through. And what I like to do with the barrel is smooth it. And that's actually going to create a really nice bond between the layers of the ribbon with the glue. And give that a minute to set, and then we can trim away the excess. Can you fold it? Wired ribbon is great for that so that you don't lose your spot. And just trim it away. And since we've got the wire there, it's easy to tell it to lay flat again. Got this really beautiful glittery base. Probably have a beautiful glittery table now. You're welcome. And then we're going to do the same thing. This one's a 2-layer, so it'll go by a little bit faster. Again, I've got my glue running down the center here, so I want to start a little off from there. Again, just 1/4 of an inch makes it a lot easier. And since this is a thinner ribbon, I would just do a smaller bead, just about here. Make sure that you've got the correct side of the ribbon facing out before you glue it down, because there is a right and a wrong side. We want that gold banding to show on the outside. I am full of hot glue. You know, it's been a good day at my house if I'm covered in hot glue. And once it's set, and that same firm pressure, you can roll it. If it helps to set it on the table, go ahead. It's always kind of reminded me of those really like kitschy videos of women getting their corset strings pulled tight, like Victorian era. Hold your breath, do it quick. If you need to, you can catch those free edges here, touch up anything so that your ribbon stays put. And then, again, since we're working with all of this mesh, I would find the original seam for the gold mesh and come over 1/4 of an inch. Staggering those seams makes everything stronger and it makes everything lay a lot more flat, which is just more attractive visually, if you ask me. And down. I'll have a little bit of glue that pops through the small mesh. You can get that to lay flat. Hold it in place. If you have any bits of wire that are poking up, you can tuck them back down or you can trim them. And once this is nice and secure, we can fold it and snip it away. I've still got like some little loose tails here, and what I can do is just a little bit. I wouldn't even pull the trigger all the way down. One of the worst things about hot glue is that while it gets the job done and very quickly, you end up with all of these cobwebs of glue. And I find them very unsightly. Nothing like mars a otherwise polished piece than having all of these spider webs of glue all over. So it's definitely worth it at this point. Take a minute, make sure that you don't have any glue all over the place, that the jars are nice and clean. That way, when you go to pour your wax, you're not contending with hot glue getting mixed in there and potentially unstabilizing things. I got some coming across, catching on the top of my wick. Okay. It's looking pretty good. I think I got all of my bits there. Okay. Very fun and simple craft. And now we're going to get ready to pour the wax. This part takes a little patience. As I said before, we don't want the wax to come to a boil. Generally speaking, paraffin wax, we don't want to heat it over about 180 degrees. Most of us don't have, candle thermometers or candy thermometers, anything like that on hand. So just knowing visually what to look for, I'm going to show you guys again what the wax should look like. If we overboil it, overheat it, then we can discolor it. So we're gonna take a look here, and you see, it'll be a little golden colored, but it's not going to be brown. There's not going to be weird lumps or burns or anything like that. It's really, really important. You also always want to make sure that the vessel that you're melting any wax in is clean, because I don't know about you, I have a black cat, and there is nothing worse to me than finding remnants of my cat in my projects. I love her, but that is not how I want to include her in my day. So these are 8-ounce containers. For an 8-ounce candle container, generally speaking, we're only going to need about 6.5 ounces tops of wax. We're not going to fill these all the way. At first, we're going to fill them slowly, and we're going to see if I can show you here. The bottom rim here, we want to just kiss that bottom rim. That way, as the wax sets, what's going to happen is that over the course of the next hour or so, you're going to actually see that the wax contracts, and it will do this. You're going to see a divot that's going to form. So we're going to want to save a little bit of wax so that after it's set like so, we'll be able to fill that divot in. Now let's fill these, and then I'm going to show you more about how to deal with this divot. Okay. Do not pour directly onto the wick or to the side of it. That way you don't have to worry about overheating the wax that's on the wick. That wax that's on the wick has a higher melting point. So you don't have to necessarily worry that you're going to ruin it, but you can make it kind of tippy. Once you pour the wax in, just make sure that your wick is kind of centered. It's okay if it tips a little bit. It's not going to cause too much trouble. The type of wicks that I've provided generally work well with candles up to 4 inches in diameter. Any more than that, and you have to start playing around with setting up additional wicks. And that's where you'll see it, like you go to the store and they'll have like 2 wick or 3 wick or 4 wick candles, and so making sure that you're aware of how far out the heat will radiate from a wick is really important if you start making bigger candles. Something I didn't know when I was first starting out. So then I would end up with these candles that weren't burning evenly, and I would end up having to freeze them and scoop all the wax out and redo it. And slowly I came to realize that even though it is a simple process, there is a little bit of math to it, and I hate to admit that I am math adverse, but the more I've embraced the mathematics of candle making, the more pleasurable an experience it has become for me. So I still have a little bit of wax left in here. Keep that set aside. I'm going to scoop these over very gently. Now I tend to leave these to set up overnight. You'll see that they'll skin over pretty quickly, but the inside is going to stay molten. So if you start jostling it around or poking it or moving the wick around, you're going to end up with air bubbles inside the candle. And aside from being unsightly, what can happen is it'll cause uneven burning issues. It can actually cause the wick to get embedded deep in the wax. And, you know, it can cause your candle to not function the way that you would like it to. All right. So while we're keeping an eye on those, as far as this one goes, I had this one set up. I poured this 2 days ago. Let's see if I can bring this a little closer. There we go. You see, it gets craggy. There's nothing that you can do about that. That's always going to happen. There's no amount of careful pouring. And so that's why we do a second pour towards the end. You see, I came up to the rim here. I've got a little bit of space. And what we're going to do, and you can even use just a kitchen knife. It's nothing crazy. We're just going to poke some holes in here, and that's going to help the wax to kind of penetrate and find any of those air bubbles that are hanging out here around the wick. Let's see. Nothing too involved. And then very carefully, let me move that was a little loud. We're going to pour around the wick. Now, obviously, this wax is warmer than the wax that is in this set candle. So we'll see a little bit of melting. You might even see a little air bubbles. It's okay to very gently tap it if you notice any bubbles forming. It is important that you add enough wax that it touches all around the perimeter of the glass. Very, very gently. And there you have it. So I added just a little bit. If that was even 1/8 of an inch deep additional wax, that's a lot. You know, I still have at least 1/4 of an inch gap between the top of the candle and the top of the glass. You're going to want to have that because, you know, fire and wax, and it makes a mess. And so the beauty of a container candle is that everything stays contained. Another thing to keep in mind is that once this has set, you're going to be able to trim this wick down. I wouldn't trim it down any lower, honestly, than about 1/2 an inch so that you are able to set the candle on fire easily. Oh, there you have it. Does anybody have any questions or technical issues that I can help them with right now?
How do you add fragrance to candles?
Fragrance load is, that's a little bit of math. You're going to generally need to calculate that out against how many ounces you're adding in wax. So for I believe it is for every pound of wax, I think it's less than a teaspoon worth of essential oil. But some essential oils have different fragrance loads to them. You can generally go online and search for the brand, and it will tell you exactly like how much their fragrance load is. I personally, I have migraines, so I don't do too heavy in the fragrance department. I don't mind when I sniff my candle that I can smell it, but I don't necessarily like walking into a room and being able to smell a candle from a few feet away. But for a candle this size, I would honestly not add more than like maybe 15 drops of an essential oil.
Vicki, could you show us your heating setup there, your boiler?
Oh, of course.
And also let us know what else people could use if they don't have exactly what you have.
Okay, so I actually, I use a very basic double boiler. I have here, this is a candle melting pot. You can find these on Amazon for about $12 to $15. And it's just nice because it has the pour spout and then you have a dedicated piece for candles. And this holds several pounds of wax at once. There are other more sophisticated setups that involve these giant cauldrons with spigots. But this one, for my purposes, when I'm just pouring maybe like a dozen candles at a time, this one works really well. And it's just a small sauce pot. And the pot here, you can go even more low tech than that. You can take an old can and place it right into the water bath. So you've got a water bath in here, or a Pyrex, very important, jar or a measuring cup. You know, the thing to keep in mind with whatever you're using is that if you get wax on it, you don't necessarily want to be dumping a whole bunch of wax down your drain when you clean it up, because it can clog your drain and it can make the pipes run really slow. It's a nasty, nasty mess. Depending on the composition of your wax, you know, some of the protein that's in it can actually really stink if it's left to ferment in your pipes. So if you feel that you really want to be making candles a lot, it's good to have a couple of things that are like your dedicated candle setup. But if you're just doing it like once a year like this, you know, just a small saucepan and a Pyrex, the nice glass Pyrex measuring cups are really great. And set it up like that, put it in. It's okay if it dips down. The water is there to help act as an intermediary for the heat exchange. You don't want to just put wax in a pot straight on top of a boiler, a burner, because you're going to burn the wax. So that's the important thing there. Some people, if they're not necessarily wanting to babysit their pots and they're putting like a jar or a can in there, another thing that they might do to help with the heat exchange is that they'll put some stones in the bottom of the pot too to create additional space. That's really the main purpose of a double boiler, is to create some space between the direct heat source and the thing you're trying to melt. If any of you've ever melted chocolate before to make like ganache or frosting, you've pretty much done the same thing. Any other questions?
Yes.
I think Diane has a question.
I do. Can you use the microwave to do this?
I would not recommend it, because the microwave, the way that microwave heat works, it actually causes microscopic explosions of the water particles. So you're not going to get very even melting. You're more likely to coat the inside of your microwave with wax than get the desired consistency.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
What about using a crock pot?
You can. The cauldrons I mentioned before are essentially glorified crock pots. So you could set a whole bunch of wax if you wanted to in a can and use your crock pot for your heat exchange. Make sure you get some water in there for a water bath, and that would work beautifully.
Yes, but then what about washing out the crock pot?
If you put your wax inside of a container and then put it inside the crock pot and have water going around, that's going to facilitate the heat exchange. And so you won't have to worry about too much of a mess. If wax gets on anything that you don't want it to, the easiest way to deal with it chill it in the freezer for a few hours, scrape what you can off with like a butter knife, and then Dawn dish soap does wonders for wax mess.
Great. Okay.
Now, after it got to the consistency you wanted, did you leave it on that second burner to stay warm, or it's not, that second burner is not on? It was just
That second burner isn't on. I didn't want to burn my wax. I pulled it off.
Okay.
If you notice that the wax starts clouding over, as it's starting to do now, I can show you what the skin of that would look like. You can just heat it back up. So you'll start to get like that kind of funky skin look to it. It's the fats. So you'll really start to see those fats congeal.
I was gonna say, it looks like chicken broth after it sits a while.
Yeah, that does kind of remind me of like when I'm making gravy almost at that stage.
Where do you buy your supplies? And like, if somebody just wanted to do this a couple times a year, where would you recommend people get supplies?
There are a couple of great places. I hate to be that person who's like Amazon, but Amazon does have everything.
Okay.
You know, you got to shop the sales. Michael's, I know that they for sure offer candle wax paraffin. And normally they have like those 50% off coupons. I wouldn't buy 10 pounds of paraffin wax personally for less than, for more than $20. I know that Michael's tends to sell it higher than that, but that's because they're always offering coupons. So just make sure that you have a coupon when you go in there, and you should be able to get about 10 pounds of wax for about, I would say, $12 to $15. If you're getting soy wax chips, you're going to expect to pay more. Beeswax is going to cost more. I don't tend to work in beeswax. If you would like to, I do know that there are a lot of great apiaries in the area. I would reach out to them before I would go online, because why not buy local wax? As far as soy wax goes, I recently purchased 10 pounds of that for about $38, including tax and shipping. But even though it's a little higher cost, soy wax can be used as lotion. And I love to use it this time of year because it has a very low melt point. I believe it's about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can literally scoop it right off of the candle, and I rub it in as a cuticle butter, and it keeps my hands from cracking during the winter.
Vicki, would you recommend the same sources for the wicks and the wick sticker and, you know, anything else?
I would buy, honestly, from Amazon for wicks and wick stickers as opposed to buying from Michael's, simply because you can buy in bulk from Amazon, and you're going to do a lot better in bulk pricing. For what you're going to spend to get maybe a couple dozen going into Michael's, you can literally buy well over 100. I think I just got 400 wick stickers cost me less than $8. And you can buy, you can either buy the pre-done wicks. I believe that bags of those generally are 100 for less than $30. I think I've seen it as low as like 15 to 20. Or you can, if you really get into it, you can buy big spools of the cotton wicking. And then you would need another tool, and I could bring that out another time. I don't have it with me today. But they make a little metal tool that sits on top of your jar, and you can thread your wick through, and it holds everything in place the same way that we're cheating today.
I know you talked earlier about recycling jars and whatnot, and perhaps I missed this, so forgive me for that. Is there anything to look for or to avoid? I imagine you can't just use any glass container, like a drinking glass or something like that. Might not stand up to the heat, and the heat of the pouring, and then maybe the heat of the burning. So what do you look for? Like pickle jars and mustard jars and things like that?
I tend to look for thicker glass jars. Anything that tends to be dishwasher safe, oven safe, those are going to be able to handle the heat. I shy away from very thin porcelain, though I've seen lots of makers that go around, they collect antique teacups and they have absolutely no problem. So, some of it is that you have to use your own judgment. If the glass feels very brittle or the vessel itself looks suspect, I wouldn't even risk pouring in it. My absolute favorite are honestly better than bullion jars. I use a lot of better than bullion. I'm a soup person, and so I save these jars, and they're beautiful. I also know there's a big maker community surrounding projects with the Yoplait weed jars. Those glass jars are beautiful, and they are great for candles.
Canning jars, I guess, would be fine too, because they go into a pressure canner and
Oh yeah, any type of canning jar. If I have them on hand, I reuse them for sure. But generally, the spendthrift in me, I don't want to go out necessarily and buy fresh canning jars when, I go through jars like they're water in my house. My family is addicted to condiments.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, I'll give you time to unmute yourself if you need to or type it in. Vicki, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I would just encourage you to, be daring, experiment. It's fun to add different scents. I've done all sorts of things with container candles. Paraffin can be a lot of fun to work with. You do need to be mindful of the label, and it will tell you whether you can do a container pour only with the wax, or whether the wax is structurally sturdy enough that you can actually do a molded candle. So you pour it into a mold, and after it's set, you can chill it, demold it, and it burns freestanding. Because if you use the kind of wax that we used here to make a molded candle and you start to burn it, it's going to explode everywhere. It's just going to be a mess. But when you start doing these kinds of molded candles, the sky's the limit. You can embed natural objects into them. You can, I did some, it was really fun. I used dry coffee grounds, cinnamon, and coffee beans. I layered it in, and so the candles smelled amazing. It was like walking into a coffee shop. I've seen people, makers, that will add a very fine, thin layer of wax on the inside and press dried flowers inside the jar, and then do their pours. And so you can really express yourself in a number of ways making candles, and it's so relaxing. It's really a great way to unwind and make something that you can share and you can enjoy and that you can really be proud of.
Okay. For anybody who would like to see this program again, two options. We are recording it. We'll clean it up and then post it on YouTube in a couple of days probably. We're also, there's so much interest. We're doing this program again on Tuesday, December 22nd at 6 p.m. If you're interested, you're welcome to watch that one. Just email us at that same email address, registrations@BootenHomesLibrary.org, and we'll send you the link for that one. It's a different link, and you can watch along with that one if you'd like to do it again. But that program is, I think it's full. It is full, but you can definitely watch it again if you'd like to there.
I'd be happy to post a supply list ahead of time so that anybody who's interested could go out and pick up what they need to.
Oh, that's a great idea. Great idea. Thank you, Vicki.
Oh, of course.
Okay. If there are no other questions or anything, thank you very much, Vicki, for presenting.